Welcome to the Career Ready Podcast. Learn about resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, interviewing, and all things you need to be career ready with the Career Service Center at College of DuPage. I'm one of your hosts, Pierre Michaels. Later in today's episode, I'm going to lead the conversation of incorporating classroom experience on the resume.
And I'm your other host, Jordan Rembrecht. I'm going to start our episode today with some information about the Career Ready competency of leadership. Now, NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, they survey employers every year who hire entry-level talent, such as interns and entry-level full-time hires, to try to see what are the top competencies that these employers are looking for in their new hires. And consistently, leadership is amongst one of those that are top ranked. Now, NACE, they define the leadership competency as recognize and capitalize on personal and team strengths to achieve organizational goals. Now, why that's important? When we recognize the strengths of individuals, it boosts their productivity and the satisfaction with their work. When we combine that with the strengths of the team, it improves teamwork and innovation, which leads to better achieving results. NACE also identifies behaviors in addition to the competency definition, one of them being motivate and inspire others by encouraging them and by building trust. To understand why this is important in the workplace, I want you to think about it from the perspective of a new employee. You'd want there to be someone in your workplace who acts as your cheerleader, motivating you and capitalizing on your strengths. You also want to develop that relationship to get to the point that you have mutual trust with that individual to help back each other up. And we don't necessarily have to wait until we're in the workplace to demonstrate this. We can demonstrate leadership in school through things like group projects. Now, when it comes to encouraging and motivating others, you can do things such as taking lead and organizing group projects, which could include things like setting up meeting times or orchestrating check-ins with the teammates. Having set meeting times helps motivate others to stay on track with the project deadlines. Also, by checking in with others, you're showing empathy and offering support that will not only help build that mutual trust, but also inspire others when it comes to the work of the project. To build mutual trust, you can demonstrate this by actively listening to others' ideas and concerns. Try to see where they're coming from and factor in their point of view. While sometimes students may not always see the long-term effects of building these relationships and mutual trust, they can really make a difference. The relationships you build with your fellow classmates can help serve as a resource for you long after the classroom. Students are able to demonstrate many, if not all, of the NACE competencies through their academic experience, school community involvement, and prior work experience, etc. Some competencies you may be stronger at than others, and that's okay. It's a matter of reflecting the competencies you've demonstrated on the resume.
Thanks, Jordan. Just as you were saying, there's a lot of great value in the academic process. And honestly, students often underestimate how much they're developing in the classroom and how well those experiences prepare them for the next step. And we're going to, of course, focus on that perspective of employment. Today, we're focusing on how that classroom experience can translate into a resume ready to connect to those employers and showing those experiences that employers really care about. When students come to us for resume help, we often hear things like, I haven't had any employment or I haven't worked in the field yet. But employment is not your only type of experience. Experience is any time you've been involved or you've applied yourself and demonstrated your skill sets. In the academic setting, that might include labs, research papers, case studies, group projects, presentations, simulations, working with different software or technology. There's just so many different things out there. All of these are experiences where you're applying your knowledge, and that's exactly what employers want to see. Jordan, when you've met with students, and this topic of classroom experience comes up, what has the reaction been?
They're often very surprised. So work experience or internship experience are oftentimes the only types of experiences that students view. When you list all that falls under academic experience, such as the ones you just listed, like labs, research papers, case studies, it could be pretty eye-opening to students.
Yeah, I experienced that as well, right? They just don't realize those possibilities. So let's start talking about that. And I'm going to go through some different examples here. So let's say you're studying STEM, right? You're running experiments, analyzing data, writing lab reports, utilizing the specialized equipment in the classroom, but that's all real experience. It mirrors what you're going to be doing in an internship or on that employment role. Maybe you're a business student. You might be reviewing financial statements, creating budgets, conducting market research, using Excel, QuickBooks, other software, right? These are all great tools and skill sets that are simulating those workplace responsibilities. Maybe you're a social science or humanities student, and you could be conducting interviews or surveys. You're writing research papers, leading different discussions, and analyzing historical trends. These are all foundational skill sets that will show up in different career paths. Or maybe you're those creative students, a technical student. A lot of times in these programs, you're building a portfolio, and that's because that's showcasing that development as a professional through the courses, right? You're developing and demonstrating technical abilities, that you're reflecting that real work projects through the classroom. These are all things worthy of the resume. These are just a few examples to help get you thinking what that classroom may look like, but how that can also translate into that experience employer will be valuing. But it doesn't just have to come from the classroom, right? As a student, you could be involved in many ways. Maybe it's different social clubs, student government, campus events, volunteering for different activities, or any other extracurricular opportunities. These may not relate directly to a major or employment goal, but they are still demonstrating those very valuable competencies such as problem solving, communication, teamwork, professionalism, and leadership, as Jordan was talking about earlier. Employers consistently look for these skills, sometimes more often than those technical skills that are coming up directly in the classroom. So Jordan, do you have a recent or unexpected example of a student experience that translated well into a resume?
Yeah, I do. So I recently met with a STEM student whose resume initially was pretty solely focused on part-time work experience with some technical skills mentioned. The more we talked in the appointment, though, we were able to identify projects that they've worked on in their classes, as well as some additional technical skills that they learned in the classroom that were initially missing from that resume. When looking at it under the lens of a STEM recruiter, I feel that the student walked away with a stronger resume since it was more relevant to their field.
I'm so glad that you were able to sit down with that student, help them reflect on that STEM classroom experience, and really start translating how that can show up on the resume. So now let's go ahead and think about representing this academic information on the resume. Of course, there is the education section where you could be identifying related coursework or those activities and volunteer sections. But I like to actually label it as academic experience or maybe even leadership experience, or we could call it related experience and let it expand a little bit further as well. But as you present this information on the resume, you want the experiences to look very similar to other jobs. So you want to have an organization. So this could be College of DuPage and that class name. For the location, you could just have Glen Ellen, Illinois as the home location for College of DuPage. The date range, you want to include a month and year. This could be of that semester that you took that class, or maybe it's a range that's spanning multiple semesters. Maybe it's a lab work that you're doing that isn't isolated to one semester. Then have a longer date range there. And then make sure that you're including a title. You could just say student or student project, but try to be more descriptive and connect it to your goals. Maybe it's a robotic engineering student for a robotics lab, right? You're making those direct connections. After presenting that information, you want to get into the details. Ideally, we would say you have 3 to 5 bullet points or bulleted statements describing this experience. We're going to use the very similar structure for that employment on the resume. So here, instead of saying that you learned how to do something or you developed this knowledge base, instead, you want to be communicating your actions that you were doing. How were you involved in that classroom, in that lab through this experience? Emphasize the involvement demonstrated through that process. To help you get started, follow a very simple formula. Start with an action word, expand into what you were doing or how you were doing that activity, then end with the result or the outcome of these efforts. So I've got a few different examples here for you to think about. Maybe an accounting student can write on their resume, analyze financial statements to identify trends and assess the financial health of a simulated client project. Or a legal student may say, conduct research on Supreme Court cases to evaluate their impact on modern legal arguments. A biology student could include on their resume, performed enzyme activity experiments and documented findings in a formal lab report. Or maybe a marketing student would write, developed a marketing plan including competitor analysis and budget projects for a hypothetical product launch. Right? All these are things done in the classroom that match up well to that employment field. Now, it's easy for me to say this, right? I've had some time to think about it, and I'm very used to this. So thinking of that language, brainstorming, that information can sometimes be that big barrier. Well, we have a great resource called Career Coach. If you go to cod.edu/career coach, you can look up different descriptions for jobs, look up those descriptions that align with your academic studies to brainstorm those related professional languages. Jordan, is there anything else you want to add to help our listeners write this information on their resume?
Sure. Not necessarily add, but maybe emphasize. I think you did a nice job here of highlighting the different ways that students can add the experience as it relates to their field of study. And I think that this goes hand in hand nicely with the listing of relevant coursework, as you would do under an education section. I like this because this way you're including the course names, which is always a great way to incorporate keywords in your resume, but then you're also providing that supporting information to showcase the work you did in that class on the resume.
Thank you, Jordan. So as we wrap up here, know the value of these experiences goes far beyond the resume. They could also be included on your LinkedIn profile, mentioned in your cover letter, and definitely discussed in the interview. When a job posting asks for experience, remember, your classroom development is experience. Don't sell yourself short. Reflect on how you've grown inside and outside the classroom and use that to confidently present yourself to employers. Jordan, any final thoughts for students who still feel hesitant about showcasing their academic work?
I'd say remember that the more details you're able to add about your classroom experience, such as the dates of your work, are going to help boost the amount of relevant experience you have on your resume. This is going to be especially helpful for students as you're applying for your first internship or job out of school. When you take the time to reflect on your academic experience and incorporate it into your resume, it also helps you see all the amazing things you've accomplished thus far in your education, which can in turn help boost your confidence in your ability to perform the job you're seeking. Thanks to all of our listeners for joining us today. I hope you feel better prepared to include your academic experiences on the resume. There was no listener question in today's episode, but if you have a question and you want to hear it answered in a future episode, you can submit it to careerpodcast@cod.edu. As we end here, we encourage you to join us for our next episode for more information to help you be career ready.